Aita for being unsure whether to ask one of my best friends to be in my wedding party. Hello, everyone. This is my first post in this subreddit, so I appreciate your understanding if I make any mistakes. This story is quite lengthy and requires some context, but I will do my best to summarize it. The names have been altered to protect both theirs and my identities, primarily for their sake rather than mine. I am simply seeking advice, and this situation is not nearly as scandalous as some of the things I have seen shared here. I will also strive to be objective and acknowledge my own biases and shortcomings, but please remember that this reflection only represents my perspective, however nuanced it may be. For reference, best friend, Andrea best friend's boyfriend, Kevin best friend's best friend, Jason my current partner and fiancé, Julia. The backstory for this narrative takes place when we were all around 18 to 22 years old. Kevin is slightly older than us, but that's not particularly relevant. First, some background regarding the friendship, which is both intricate and complicated. I met Andrea shortly after beginning university, and although we were pursuing different majors, we developed a strong friendship by sitting at the same table during one of our art classes. I discovered that she was from the same city, unlike me, who had moved from a neighboring province to attend. She had a family with which she struggled to get along, and a boyfriend named Kevin, with whom she had been since high school. I also got to know a couple of her close friends, including Jason, important for later. We began to spend time together, hiking during breaks between classes because we both enjoyed it. After cannabis was legalized in Canada that year, we sometimes went for little hikes and sessions in the woods outside the city. At that time, I was hopelessly single throughout most of our university friendship, and I must admit that I had difficulty differentiating between love for a friend and romantic feelings. I also had a tendency to develop crushes on many of my friends, though I was never the type to voice these feelings unless they mentioned something first. This pattern extended back to high school, where I had, in retrospect, notably low emotional intelligence and often didn't understand my feelings. Consequently, I developed feelings for this girl with whom I spent so much time, despite her being in a happy relationship. This caused me significant guilt because I believed these feelings to be inappropriate. However, I felt a unique connection with her that I had not experienced with anyone else up to that point. It might have been the first or second time I felt such a way about someone. In any case, I was determined never to mention this aloud, fearing I would be seen as a homewrecker. Little did I know that I was unconsciously making some progress in that department already. Things progressed to the point where we began discussing our mutual interests in movies and television, subjects I am extremely passionate about, along with other forms of media, and we would occasionally binge-watch shows on Netflix in my dorm after our hikes and smoke sessions. Was there a selfish part of me desiring something more? Almost certainly. I was 18 and driven by those impulses. Would I have permitted anything to occur if the opportunity had arisen? I don't know. I like to think I would have made the right decision and not pursued it, but it's impossible to predict how those scenarios would play out. In any case, nothing ever happened. We simply watched shows like Star Trek or BoJack Horseman or something else that piqued our interest at the time. However, over time, her boyfriend, quite understandably, became uncomfortable with this ongoing situation. If I'm honest, I was surprised he hadn't expressed concern from the beginning, because I'm not a jealous person. Yet if my partner informed me that they were alone with someone in a dorm room watching Netflix, especially in the popular Netflix and chill context, I would certainly feel some type of way about it. She confided in me that he would feel more at ease if we all spent time together, which I was more than open to but also somewhat intimidated by. After all, what if he truly thought I was cheating with his girlfriend, and every time we hung out, it felt like an interrogation? My own lingering feelings only exacerbated this anxiety. Much to my surprise, things went exceptionally well. He appeared relaxed and was enjoyable to speak with on various topics, also joining in the hikes and smoke sessions, and we all grew noticeably closer. I didn't see any signs of jealousy on his part, and he genuinely seemed to enjoy my company. I continued to suppress my feelings because who was I to jeopardize what they shared? Kevin appeared to be a great match for Andrea, with a history that I could never replicate, having been together since high school. This dynamic continued for probably close to a year, maybe more. I can't recall exactly. One night at work, Andrea texted me, visibly upset regarding her best friend Jason, who had done the very thing I resolved never to do. He had been harboring feelings for her for some time. Unlike me, he allowed resentment to build over the fact that she was happy with someone else to the point where that evening, he took her on a hike, just the two of them, and confessed that he had loved her since they first met, claiming how happy they would be together. He issued one of the most inappropriate ultimatums a friend can give. Leave her boyfriend for him, or he would remove himself entirely from her life because it was too painful to see her with someone who wasn't him. I acknowledged how angry and upset this situation must have made her and agreed that it was an absolutely awful move. She was terrified of losing him as a friend, but couldn't comprehend why he would jeopardize their entire 10-year friendship for this. Being in my own situation at the time, I could somewhat understand it, but to a certain degree, I even felt sympathy for Jason because I related to longing for someone unattainable. However, he truly messed up by handling things in that manner. Even at a young age, I recognized that Andrea appeared happy or at least seemed to be. And if I genuinely cared for them and their well-being, her happiness should matter more than my feelings, even if it wasn't with me. I told her that Jason had clearly made his choice, and while it was unfortunate, it would be a lose-lose situation if he followed through on his ultimatum. Clearly, he was prepared to lose her if he insisted on proceeding that way. I mentioned that he shouldn't essentially coerce her into being with him, and that she didn't owe him her love just because he professed it to her. Additionally, I offered to be there for her if she needed support, and assured her that I would respect any decision she made. I thought that would conclude our conversation for the night. I was mistaken. She then revealed that she had something else to share, and that everything happening made her realize that holding back wasn't healthy for us. At that point, she came clean to me. By now, I had essentially resigned myself to the idea that there would be nothing more than friendship between us, and was starting to accept that as I matured and recognized the distinction between platonic and romantic love. That she had been processing her feelings toward me lately and discovered that she felt something beyond mere friendship. She expressed uncertainty regarding what to do about these feelings and asked whether I felt similarly. I admitted that I did, explaining that despite my best efforts, I had developed feelings for her as well. I reassured her that I would never have treated her as Jason did and expressed my irritation that he tried to manipulate her in that way. I had met him a couple of times, and he seemed pleasant, but I guess he wasn't all he appeared to be. She acknowledged that she knew I would never act that way. I asked what our next steps would be, and she informed me that she intended to speak to Kevin soon, who, after she mentioned what transpired with Jason, was still reeling from that revelation. This terrified me for obvious reasons, but I recognized it as the right course of action. She indicated that she would request a break over the summer to sort through her feelings. Part of her confusion arose from the fact she had been with Kevin for so long. And likely, she wondered whether she missed out on other experiences by being in a relationship throughout those formative years, a dilemma many encounter when transitioning to university life. She clarified that this didn't mean we would pursue anything during that break. Rather, she wished to spend some time being single now that she was old enough to explore and enjoy herself. I respected that completely and internally expected that she would end up back with Kevin after the summer. After all, they had been together for years, and he was familiar to her. To be honest, my self-esteem wasn't in great shape, though this did not reflect my self-worth. The summer passed without many notable incidents. The only moment that nearly escalated occurred on her birthday. She organized a gathering at a hotel to prepare for a night out at the clubs, and during the evening, while waiting for the girls to finish in the bathroom, I was sitting on the edge of the tub when she came to hug me. In our tipsy state, she knocked me into the tub, practically landing on top of me. We exchanged a glance, but neither of us moved to kiss the other, even though it certainly felt like it could have happened at that moment. Keep in mind, she also invited Kevin to the party, and they had remained friends throughout the summer. He respected her wishes during this period, further solidifying my belief that he was genuinely good for her. So I would never have kissed her while he was present, let alone in front of her friends. I have never been the type to make the first move. At the end of the summer, she understandably chose to rekindle her relationship with Kevin. Jason had cut off contact and moved away, The guy took his ultimatum seriously, and I was honestly surprised by his commitment. I felt I had made the right decision by not trying to pursue anything, as that would only have complicated the situation when they eventually reunited. Like she had said, she needed to experience being single for a while rather than jump into another relationship immediately after a 5-year one. Was I justified in my reasoning? Who knows? It certainly isn't worth pondering at this point. Around this time, I began the challenging process of letting go of my fantasies of a life with her as my partner and started to accept the idea of her simply being my lifelong best friend, which I told myself was just fine. However, due to my lack of emotional intelligence, this was also when I began to withdraw from our friendship. In distancing myself from her romantically, I unintentionally created emotional and physical distance as well. Due to various circumstances, I had to return to my home province before completing my studies. Could I have stayed? Perhaps. Did I exert enough effort to find a way to do so? No. In some ways, Jason's situation seemed appealing. If you distance yourself from something you cannot have, it hurts less to not have it. Was I consciously thinking that moving away would be the best course of action? No, but I suspect that part of me believed it would dull the pain and longing a bit. The ultimatum was still unpleasant, but the distance seemed beneficial to my subconscious. I found employment in my home province and discovered a company that I genuinely liked. Up until that point, I had a plethora of job experiences. I started working young and often juggled multiple jobs. Generally, I would feel satisfied for about a year, but then I would either become disillusioned with management or just feel bored since I no longer felt challenged by my work. This position was people-oriented, allowing me to interact with others frequently, which is where I excel. And because the people changed constantly, the challenges never faded. Consequently, I kept postponing a return to school because for the first time, I felt content in my work environment. I eventually became a full-time employee and spent over 4 years with the company before we can fast forward to the present day. During this time, I must admit that I played a considerable role in our friendship deteriorating. While I am adept at communicating in person, I am absolutely terrible at staying in touch with everyone I care about. Combined with my instinct to distance myself from pain, I realized that I dropped the ball on this front. She made attempts to maintain our connection and engage in conversation, as we used to, but the bond that I initially felt so strongly began to fade, gradually at first and more noticeably by now. She expressed her frustration about this more than once, particularly when I forgot to wish her a happy birthday or two. Birthdays do not hold much significance for me personally. I wasn't raised to celebrate them, but they matter greatly to her. I tried to convey this to her, while also apologizing, recognizing that I hurt her regardless, and she forgave me multiple times for neglecting to communicate effectively. She also expressed that she felt we were drifting apart. Although I knew this was true, I tried to deny it, insisting we were just as connected, but that I would strive to make a more substantial effort. That greater effort, however, did not endure long before I reverted to my old tendencies. ADHD can be quite the challenge, can't it? This understandably frustrated her. Around this time, her boyfriend Kevin began to change and adopt more radical views, particularly fixating on conspiracy theories. I would engage him in conversation, using a Socratic approach to help him articulate his beliefs, leading to discussions about those theories. This fascination with conspiracy eventually fostered some troubling perspectives toward people of color and the LGBTQ community, which still confuses me because Andrea identifies as a member of the LGBTQ community and celebrates her bisexuality. I genuinely don't understand how she can support him while he disparages LGBTQ characters in films and television. He also became enamored with Donald Trump and his policies, and while I don't fault anyone for their beliefs, I understand how that kind of thinking can develop. I did not solely blame him for adopting a more hostile worldview, particularly as the political landscape shifted in 2016 and onwards. The dissolution of objective truth had soured many hearts during that time, as people were only exposed to narratives that aligned with their pre-existing beliefs, whether left or right-leaning. To say that this did not affect my relationship with her would be dishonest. I couldn't comprehend why she would willingly expose herself to such views, and I no longer felt close enough to have an open and honest discussion with her, fearing it would get back to him and strain my relationship with both him and Andrea. After all, no one enjoys their relationship being questioned, and if she appeared happy, who was I to interfere? Present day, or thereabouts. So, with that extensive backstory concluded. A few years back, I received an invitation to a New Year's Eve gathering in the city where all of this transpired. At the time, I was in my home province and contemplated not attending, as I was in an antisocial phase, devising reasons not to go. However, my request for time off was approved. It was a late request, and I genuinely expected it to be declined. And having recently started a new antidepressant regimen for my social anxiety, I decided that getting out to meet people would be beneficial for me. I had just exited a relationship that was decidedly detrimental to my well-being. I won't go into specifics, but suffice it to say that we were incompatible. Both of us felt a constant need to be right. You can imagine how two know-it-alls, taking things the other said out of context, would lead to a thoroughly unhealthy dynamic. It ultimately took me around 8 months to recognize this, which is longer than it should have. In fact, it was longer still because she was the one who ended the relationship claiming she needed to focus on herself. She subsequently began dating my coworker less than a month later, a fact everyone in the workplace and on Facebook knew before I did. And my foolish self tried for another couple of months to win her back after her summer breakup. After trying various dating applications and focusing on self-improvement in therapy, because I acknowledged that I was as much to blame for the failure of my last relationship as she was, I concluded that dating apps simply weren't for me. I talk too much, if you hadn't gathered this from my lengthy post, to create any meaningful or lasting conversations through an app. After all, women typically receive 30 to 50 likes on their profiles at any given time. Who could possibly keep up with that and still respond to my lengthy messages? I resolved to trust my instincts that my next partner should come naturally rather than through friends setting me up or using an artificial app where we portray ourselves as someone we are not to gain initial interest. I decided to cease using dating applications and quit actively seeking someone to fill that role in my life, allowing things to unfold as they may. I didn't have to wait long. I arrived at the party early, and only my friends, who had rented the Airbnb and invited me, were present. Shortly after, another couple, the host's best friend and her husband, arrived, along with another woman who was friends with them, named Julia. Throughout the night, we engaged in drinking games to pregame before heading out, but we were enjoying ourselves so much that we didn't notice it was already 11 p.m. It was pouring rain that evening, so we decided to keep the festivities going where we were instead of heading out. During the night, we learned a great deal about one another by playing hypothetical question games and battle of the sexes. I found out that Julia had recently exited a 5-year relationship, which had been unhappy. Her relationship had involved 4 years of openness. I use the term loosely because he chose this arrangement so he could pursue other partners. She acquiesced because she did not want to lose him. It reached a point where he was taking other women on trips that he had purportedly wanted to share with her, exacerbating the situation since she had already been deprived of the affection she sought from him. Ultimately, she reached her breaking point and ended things while he was away on a trip. Julia and her girlfriends had a good cry about the experience, and I, being more emotionally perceptive, truly empathized with her, but was also happy she was prioritizing her own well-being. Similar to my experience with Andrea, I was not inclined to say, "Hey, you're single now, want to kiss?" Even on New Year's Eve, I hesitated to assume it was a free-for-all. However, to my surprise, she asked if I was single. I replied affirmatively. She then asked if I wouldn't mind being her New Year's kiss so the two couples wouldn't be the only ones making out awkwardly. In shock, I responded, yeah, sure, why not?" That set the stage for the best kiss of my life. The other couples were, needless to say, eclipsed by our own passionate make-out session, much to my embarrassment. After downing half a quart of gin and smoking infused joints, we lost ourselves in the kiss and didn't stop until I walked her back to her apartment building through the rain. She requested my number for follow-up the next day, to which I gladly complied. However, during my drive home the next day, I didn't hear from her nearly the entire way, and I began to think she must have regretted her actions and that it was merely a one-off encounter until I received a text about 30 minutes from home, complaining about the major hangover from tequila she was suffering. I understood completely. Over the course of the next 6 months, we communicated almost daily, and I took every chance to visit her while she finished school. Once she graduated, she returned home. She is actually from my hometown, which still astonishes me. We had crossed paths several times for various reasons, and I had worked with her best friends on different projects and had crushes on others. To be honest, I had crushes on quite a few people during my youth, as you might gather from my earlier accounts, and we continued our relationship. As of this year, we are engaged and I couldn't be happier. I no longer need to be right. In fact, most of the time she is, and it is refreshingly liberating. We are aligned in every aspect that matters, and we share a passion for many of the same things. This relationship has been the easiest I have ever experienced. Even when challenges arise, we discuss them openly and work together as a team to resolve them. It's never a you versus me scenario, always a we. Loving her comes so naturally, and our love languages complement each other beautifully. Recently, Andrea expressed frustration regarding my lack of communication, particularly since I met Julia. She accused me of having been friends with her merely as a means to pursue a romantic relationship, which hurt significantly. It stung for 2 reasons. Firstly, because I made her feel that way, and secondly, while that was never my intention, I could see how my subconscious might have desired that at the time, which impacted me deeply. However, now being more emotionally intelligent and having processed those feelings, I explained to her that while I had felt what I felt, I had reached a point of acceptance with our friendship and even preferred it. I questioned whether I could have been as good a partner to Andrea back then as I am to Julia now. In retrospect, I was young and didn't know myself or what I truly wanted. Nevertheless, I genuinely believed our friendship could endure, and I wanted that, even if my self-destructive behavior ultimately strained that connection due to ineffective communication. I informed Julia about this discussion a month or so after the conversation because I had always envisioned Andrea being part of my wedding party, and we are now in the process of organizing those details. My other best friend from my hometown is set to be my best man, and I had always envisioned Andrea as my best woman. My partner is open to having multiple maids or men of honor, so we plan on having 2 for each. My best friend is a definite choice for one of those spots. The other would depend on Andrea or my brother. Now, for a bit more context regarding my uncertainty about whether I should ask her. When I first informed Andrea a few days after my engagement that Julia and I were getting married, her response was simply, "Nice, congrats." While I hadn't anticipated a particular reaction, her response felt, I don't know, underwhelming. Perhaps it's unfair of me to feel this way, but it seemed like she brushed it off as though I had simply received a good grade on a test. My follow-up message was intended to share more details about the wedding and formally request her involvement in the wedding party, if not to be my best woman alongside my best friend. However, that lackluster response halted me in my tracks. Did she even want to attend? Was she merely preoccupied when she replied that way? Was I expecting too much in terms of her response? I know that if she had shared with me that she and Kevin were getting married, I would have likely asked for details and dates, but perhaps her perception of a wedding's importance is akin to how I view birthdays. Now, I find myself mired in self-doubt. On one hand, I recognize that asking her to be a part of the wedding party probably won't cause any harm, but when it comes to asking if she would be my best woman, I am uncertain. I find myself hesitant because I worry that if she gave a speech, it might turn into one of those moments that would spoil the wedding, you know. Those instances where someone makes a speech that comes across as overly self-deprecating toward the bride or groom, or an extended soliloquy that just feels awkward. I witnessed this at my brother's and my cousin's weddings, and it really drained the joy from the occasion. Additionally, considering that she lives in another province from where the wedding will occur, would it even make sense? After all, her capacity to plan or coordinate anything would be significantly limited due to the distance. However, it would be the same situation if I opted for my brother as my second best man since he works in another province as well. My best friend is definitely going to take on the majority of the workload in any case. So I suppose I'm asking, am I overthinking this entire situation? I know this extensive summary may not have been brief, but I would greatly appreciate any advice you all might offer. Fortunately, I have plenty of time to sort things out before the wedding, but sometimes second thoughts can clarify a situation, and I could certainly use a little less ambiguity right now. Thank you for any and all insights you can offer on this lengthy post. I truly appreciate it.